This is a clip from our podcast From the Ground Up. We're on YouTube and Spotify, Apple Podcasts and all other podcasting platforms. I hope you enjoy it. If you like it, then make sure you check out the full episode. The link will be in the description. Okay, so I've not got a lot of experience in development.
Okay.
I do property investing, flipping houses, property businesses. I've never done development. So coach me through my first deal, right? So what do I need to do, right? If I want to walk out of the building today, and I want to find a Cambridgeshire site, something like that. What's my first step?
First step is looking at kind of your goals, because there's obviously so many different types of development sites. There's PD schemes, converting offices to, residential. There's luxury. There's affordable housing, which has a different funding mechanism to standard housing, or you could do commercial development even. And then there's also the conversation of, do you want to buy a site with planning in place already, or do you want to take it through planning, which has more risk, is arguably harder, but you can add a lot of value. So the first thing is figuring out what type of site is it you want. So like I say, whether or not it's got planning, and then also how many units, locations.
Yeah. So you're starting with like your goal, what is you want to achieve. Let's say I want the Cambridgeshire site. Let's say I want that one.
Yeah.
So I want to go for slightly higher end, not super luxury, but high end, profitable, detached houses, about 10 to 15 units. And I want it off plan.
Yeah.
No planning.
Okay.
What do I do? So
then you need to understand, what makes one piece of land get planning over another. So that's understanding planning, basically. It's quite a difficult thing to teach, because nowhere in national or local planning does it say, if you bring forward a site that looks like XYZ, you will get planning for this. Yeah. It's like, here's a policy that 3 people could interpret 3 completely different ways, and there's actually 50 policies by which you have to consider, which means there's 150 different combinations of how people might interpret it, because you'd interpret it different to how I would and the planner would, and even your planning consultant might. Across all of that, you then got to somehow figure out, what does that mean for a piece of land? Which is a big part of what we teach, obviously, in the education programme, is how do we interpret that? And that's an ever-changing thing as well, depending on where the council is with their land supply, for example. But once you understand why something would get planning, and things to consider are, is it in the development boundary? Is it a brownfield site, or is it a greenfield site? What's the housing supply like in that area? Would it be overdevelopment? Would there be any overlooking issues? You're trying to understand. I always say to people, if you can't think of a clear argument as to why, other than, I just think it should, that's not a reason. Yeah. There's got to be a very valid reason why this should get planning.
And is that something I need to decide? Is that something I need to figure out and I need to present?
In terms of when you're looking for sites, so I call it like the site sourcing, in that stage, yes, that's something you need to know, because otherwise you don't know what to approach. You're going to be approaching everything, and 90% of it is never going to get planning. So you need to know, at least in that first instance, when you look at a piece of land, is that an opportunity or not? If it is, yes, well, then we do certain site checks. So we're now looking more intra-site. So is it in a flood zone? Are there any listed buildings? Any TPO trees? Is there any risk of contamination on the site? Any major red flags that would mean we're not going to approach this. Once we've gone through that process, we then get a list, basically, of, and this is one part people don't understand. It's not 10 sites, it's not 20 sites, it's hundreds of sites, because you're basically, it's like cold calling.
So it's lead gen, isn't it?
It's lead gen, yeah. And so there has to be massive output, massive effort, massive volume at the start. Send all your letters out. Yeah. Once you get a response, that's when you'd probably bring in your planners, and then they'll start justifying why it'll get planning and what for. Yep.
So just so I can keep up. So I go out. I need to learn the skills and the knowledge around what gets planning, why does it get planning, the typical kind of, a council might look at something and go, yes, this will get planning, and this is why. No, it wouldn't, and this is why.
Yeah, like the green flags, the red flags.
Yeah, and it's not a hard and fast rule, but there is like a...
There's loose legislation.
Slight method to the madness. Okay, so I learn about that. I then need to identify sites...
based on that.
Based off of that. I then send out letters, I'm assuming find the owner on land registry.
Oh, yeah, missed that point. So we have different mapping softwares. There's loads out there. We use one called Searchland. You can buy the title information off of there. how you then go about populating your letter, use virtual assistants, mail merging, all sorts of different methods. But yeah, send out bulk,
hundreds, thousands of letters
bulk
to
volume.
sites that you think could fit the criteria that you've identified. And then, okay, so someone gets back to me, hey, I'm really interested in selling my really big garden. What am I doing here? Am I just negotiating with them? What's the ideal outcome with the seller? What's the conversation that I want to be having, and what's the end goal that I'm trying to steer them towards? Yeah,
so in the situation where you want to take the site through planning, your end goal is agreeing an option agreement. So an option agreement is a purchase contract which gives you the option but not the obligation to purchase that property or that piece of land for an agreed period of time at an agreed price. So the beauty of an option is you're not having to buy that land until planning is achieved. So obviously, and if planning isn't achieved, you're not buying the land.
Yeah.
So as a developer, it buys us time and de-risks the deal. So that's the objective, is getting that option agreement signed at obviously a price that works. So that's what your negotiation's then about. So that first phone call for me, it's about introducing yourself, building a bit of rapport, also understanding the motivations behind, you normally get between a 10 and 15% response rate on letters.
Really? That's quite high.
With including follow-ups, that is. So follow-ups are super important.
Yeah.
You can't just send the one letter, you got to hound them until you get a restraining order.
How many times do you hound them?
Definitely.
Every day? Every week? Every month?
Yeah. So normally 4 weeks after the first letter.
Yeah.
And then 2 months after that next letter, and then like every 6 months. And, my approach letter always stresses, who I am. I stress that it's their land specifically that I'm approaching. It's not, I'm sending letters to every piece of land locally. It's your land.
Yeah.
And I stress that I believe that land has development potential, and I have an active need in my business that their piece of land would satisfy. So I kind of create a little bit of, there's a demand here. Somewhere anywhere between sort of 10 and top end would be probably 15, might be a bit high, maybe 10 and 13.
Yeah.
But yeah, once someone gets a response, I want to understand the motivations. Why were they one of the people that called us back? Because that can be quite telling in terms of then going into your negotiations moving forward. And another thing I like to say is, assuming we can get to the right price, a price aside, is there anything else that would stop you selling your land? Because you want to know what would their other future objections potentially be. And it might help you with deal structure and your general offer to know. Sometimes timelines are important to them. They might have a business there that they need to move. They might need new premises. They might actually want to stay in one of the houses. Getting creative with the deal structure, with development, you can do anything basically. So understanding that's really important.
Who can support me in that? So someone says to me, I want to sell my land, but I want to stay in this house. And I also want to, makes a bit of an uplift on any planning gain that you get. Yeah. Who do I speak to? Is that solicitor that will put that into writing, into an agreement, or is that something you just agree directly with the seller and you specify it on some kind of a heads of terms, or what is that? Is that specified in the option?
So really, in terms of putting that creative deal structure together, that's the skill of being a developer. That's one of the skills that there's certain skills that you can kind of outsource, engineers and things, but getting creative with deal structures and packaging it really is on you to learn and get creative with. Typically then I would put kind of like a heads of terms together, and then that would go to a solicitor, and terms within that would then form the option agreement.
Yeah.
You can, if you wanted, if you weren't as confident, maybe get a land agent involved. It would depend on the skill set of the land agent. So,
and also, surely they'd want a piece. So it's
a skill I'd really recommend any aspiring developer or active developer really home in on.
Yeah.
Because it's in that negotiation that you're going to make money in your deal. If you get that negotiation right or wrong, that's like
it's
backbone.
It's something I always say with houses is the profits in the purchase.
100%.
Actually, if you can purchase it at the right price,
your
money's locked in. You're a lot more safe.
100%.
You can develop something out, and you might go over, but if you've got it at the right price in the first place, it's really, really important. And I think it's something I've explored, the land sourcing side a little bit when I've looked into developments. The land sourcing really interests me because I know that there's a lot of money to be made.
Huge amounts.
Because the profits in the purchase.
Yeah.
So, okay. So I've got a seller. They've agreed to sell. We've got an option agreement with them. I've got myself. I don't know how long you give it. A couple of years on an option. A year. A couple of years.
Nowadays, 12 months is the most common option period. Solicitors, landowners are getting a bit more queued up on putting pressure on developers. So typically you're looking at a 12-month option. They do have standard extension rights. So if there's a live planning application, it extends until the outcome of that.
Okay.
So you're not going to kill, because obviously sometimes planning's out of your control. You're not just going to lose your contract. Typically 12 months. And obviously in that time frame, you're going to pursue planning. And the overall objective is sort of taking a step back. We have to do something called an appraisal, which, I'm sure you do with your deals as well. Essentially, what are the numbers in the deal? So that's how we figure out what's the site worth, what can I offer? And ideally, we'll do an appraisal and we say this piece of land that we found in Cambridgeshire, wherever it is, we think we can get 12 units, and we think when it's got planning, if I was to put that on Rightmove or sell it to a developer, I could sell it with the benefit of planning for £1.1 million.
Okay. Fantastic.
But I'm taking on all the risk, I'm taking on the time, I'm putting in the investment. Obviously, I'm not going to pay 1.1, which is the de-risked value for the risk profile. So then it's, well, what am I going to offer? And the idea is obviously you agree it as kind of cheap as possible, and that's the profit in the land. So depending obviously what the site is will kind of dictate what it might be worth. If it was like our Cambridge deal, which was just a field, a really, barren kind of field, not big enough for agriculture, that original purchase off the farmer could have been, might have offered £300,000 for what's basically an acre of land, and they're thinking, the going rate is like 10 grand an acre. They're like, happy days.
Yeah.
You're also saying happy days, because if I get planning, there's what, £800,000 less planning costs. Let's call it 700.
Yeah,
probably wouldn't even be that expensive. No, definitely wouldn't be for 10 units, but. That's the objective basically in this process is you're identifying land, you think it's got potential.
And I appraise it myself.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's, another skill. So we've got, so go through quickly just the skills I've got to learn at this stage. So I've got to learn, apart planning, from kind of everything, but summarise. Planning. Sourcing, how to actually
deal structure.
Deal structure.
Yeah, the sourcing process, I guess, the systems and process behind. Deal structures and negotiation.
Yeah. And appraisals. How you actually
figure out what it's worth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've done that. I've got an idea. You make your offer. That gets accepted, and then great. We've got an option on something.
Full steam ahead.
What's my next step? What does that mean?
Planning. So that's when you obviously engage with your architects. You may have engaged with them sooner. Sort of when you bring them in is kind of a personal preference. Get your architects involved. Get plans drawn up. You'll need certain reports doing, like topographical surveys, and then depending on the site, you might need other types of surveys as well. With the objective being get it into planning basically as quick as possible.
Yeah.
And then it's over to the lords that be at the planning department.
And the architects, can they oversee? Because you're talking a lot about, and you mentioned it earlier, a lot of things like reports and surveys and things. Is that something, again, you have to do, or can your architect kind of coach you through that at that stage?
Your architect can massively coach you through. And that, like, for example, our architects, they'll often say you're going to need this transport survey, and they'll normally go, and here's 2 quotes already that the companies they work with. And if I want, I can go out and get my own quotes, or normally I'm just like, yeah, fine, go with them.
Okay, so you go through with them, you get planning accepted, you then... everything gets approved, and then it becomes a case of get your construction team in, break ground, and get cracking, build them and sell them.
Yeah, put very, very simply.
Yeah. It's that easy as well.
It's that easy. Once you get planning, you've then got to do certain, discharge conditions. So having planning doesn't mean you can start on site.
Okay.
So you've got to jump through some more hoops, obviously.
What hoops are they?
Depends on the site. So there's certain standard things like... construction management plans, which is just saying, where's things going to be stored, what does the traffic flow look like, you've got to submit them. You might have to prove there's no contamination on site. You could have things like archaeological issues that need sorting prior to works commencing. Drainage designs need to be approved.
And again, your architect can support you with all of this.
Support engineer starts getting involved at this stage as well. But yeah, depending on the site and the amount of detail that was submitted with the initial application will dictate what pre-commencement conditions you have associated with your approval. But basically, they need we call it discharging, basically, to say, yeah, you've completed it, we're happy, before you're allowed to technically start on site.
If you're interested in property investing, or you want to start and scale a property business, then I'm running some training to teach you how to do that very, very soon. I teach people how to build a 6-figure sourcing business. I teach people how to flip houses and make huge profits. And I also teach people how to start and scale their own property investment portfolio. If that sounds like the kind of thing you'd be interested in, click the link in the description and you can find out more. It would genuinely be an honor to be able to help you.